Thank you so much. I'd like to invite actually our three speakers this morning, Carolyn, Ignacio, and Siddhartha, to come up on stage, and maybe we can field a few questions or open up the discussion a little further about all three of these interesting topics. So I don't know if we can get the lights on for the audience, and then we can see if anyone wants to ask a question, join in. Yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to all three of you. They were just wonderful presentations. Thank you. My question is to Siddhartha. Not obviating the agenda that Queen Victoria may have have you had a chance to analyze the role of any of the photographers in staging, compositions, color, and so on?
Hello? Is this working? Is it working?
It should be.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So I have not fully, because in part, I have to say, this is scratching the surface of the most unfinished part of my research. And so what I need to do, my next plan, is to both go back to find out about the compositional power that the photographers had, and to look at manuals for photography as in terms of how things were lighted and shaded, because it's quite well composed in some of these. The other issue is that a number of the photos, the photographers are not associated with them, which makes it tricky as well. Thank you. There might be an answer like that to a number of questions, if I can.
I said, Nicholas, did you have a question back there?
Hi, yeah, excellent presentations all around. I also had a question for Siddhartha as to the uniforms and also the Indian interior at Osborne House. Were those created with input from Indian architects, artists, or craftsmen?
The room was, for sure. It's typically Lockwood Kipling, Rudyard Kipling's father, who gets the credit for that when he was working with Bairam Singh, who then took his role as a headmaster in India and actually stayed at Osborne House for a while to complete the project. The clothing, as far as we know, no. There was no consultation from any Indians on that. That was Victoria's fantasy.
So,
and it did have British military.
Okay. Were there ever any instances of her asking for Indian artists or craftsmen to come and make things for the royal household?
To come? I don't think that she invited anybody to come here, but she definitely got lots of gifts. Okay. Gifts. I mean, some were gifts, but some were also gifts.
Anyone? Other? Yeah, Sarah.
With the nomadic interiors, were pieces of those furniture put into production, or how widely distributed were they? Are they more of an idea? Did people use these, and are they still extant?
Some of them, most of them were just models. Like this exhibition happened in 1940, which is a period almost of war. Even the curatorial framework of the whole Triennale acknowledged that this was a war Triennale, and of course, there was no time to put them in production. So they remain mostly in the halls of the Triennale. But he, of course, compares them to others that were being produced, like in American sets. And many of them are very similar to common objects like the mariposa chair or like the butterfly chair or others. But these particular ones were not put on production.
They also could have a military implication as well. They also could have a military implication as well, and it's nomadism. So
yeah, there is a mention to that in the catalog that they could serve for a war context. Yes. So thank you very much. That's a good question.
Yeah, Lorraine. Thanks.
Okay, thank you to all three speakers. They were wonderful presentations. I have a quick question for Carolyn. For the Marie Antoinette watch, where is the watch now? Maybe I missed this, but where's the watch now?
It is currently in the L.A. Meyer Museum of Islamic Art in Jerusalem. I don't know. It got there because
that's fascinating. There must be a whole other story there.
was in the Breguet family until the mid-19th century, and then it was sold at auction to an English lord. And then an American collector bought it, I think in the 1980s, and he donated it to that museum in Jerusalem. And then it was stolen by a jewel heist, like a world-famous jewel thief in maybe 1997, and then it was recovered in 2005. And the Breguet company has made an exact replica of it that's, I think, in their headquarters. It's in Jerusalem now.
Thank you.
Siddhartha, really fascinating talk, and I thank all three of you. Were any Indian women brought as servants?
So a few things around that. They were not brought as servants. Some of her favorite servants were allowed to bring their wives, at which point Victoria would send memos to the house to tell the wife that I'm coming with, the Princess of Russia or the Princess of Prussia, and if you could be ready for us for tea tomorrow, wear your Indian clothes. Please don't wear the big nose ring. Like, she would really curate the way they looked. But no Indian women were hired to work there. And then of the 100 heads, well, there's 96 heads in that hallway. Only 6 of them are women.
I have a question for Ignacio. Considering these were interiors for nomadic lifestyles, were there any references in Rava's work to earlier German interiors, like the Frankfurter kitchen, thinking about optimization and standardization, aside from the references to American interiors?
Not that I know. I mean, he was fully aware of those developments because, Italian domestic interiors had incorporated that knowledge, producing Germany in different ways through kind of housing manuals and such, more via the official fascist programs for housing. But I'm not sure he mentions directly those, not that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, so Lorraine, there's another question. That's okay. No.
Okay, so, moving on. I have a question for Siddhartha about the photographs. What was if you know, what is the purpose of the photographs? Did Victoria distribute them at all? Were they exhibited in any way? Were they just put into albums?
Any, of the children? Okay, so a few of the images that I showed were distributed to the public or appeared in press, not of the children. The photos of the children are all in an album, which she has. There was one which she selected to have hand-colored, which she put in a separate, beautiful blue velvet album of her favorites that were hand-colored. Yeah. But the rest are just in an album of royal children. Of the multiple albums I went through, I only found one other photograph that had an attendant with it, which was a nanny. Otherwise, they're never shown with people in the albums that I was going through.
So they're really for the family's private use?
For Victoria's, I think, with these. She did commission those photos with the grandchildren.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Do you have a question, Marilyn?
Yeah, I have a question, the same. So you were comparing them with the photographs of mammies, southern mammies, and but they had much more intimate relationships, no, with the children. So in this case, they were just simply the Indians brought in for the ornamental purpose. Is that right?
That's what I'm guessing, yes, because as I said, there's only one mention that one of them had contact. In terms of looking at brown workers and white children, it's that period in southern, the American South that we need to look at. But yeah, these were like breastfeeding the babies at times, caring for them, had intimate relations with them. But the Indians, there's no evidence.
Right, so it sort of supports your argument that it's much more ornamental in that way.
Yeah,
right?
and balancing and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Fascinating. Great. Oh, yes, Bart.
Question for Ignacio. Looking at some of that earlier architecture, the plasticity of it, and then moving to Schindler, for example, I'm just curious, when you're talking about the furniture, it's all transportable, but was any of it commissioned locally? And what impact did the architecture have on any of that?
Sorry, again, I'm not sure I understood your question.
In other words, the furniture in Africa, were they commissioning furniture to be made there locally, and did the architecture have any impact on
To be made locally in
the
Africa?
evolution of that style and all?
Yeah. Well, these models that I'm looking at are produced in Italy. Essentially, the archives I've been working on are all Italian. So I've been looking at the furniture of the colonial interiors from two aspects. One, the one I presented today, which is models developed only in Italy, not locally in Africa. And the other one is La Rinascente, the major department store, opening stores in Africa to ship their own goods, to furnish more stable, let's say, housing, but not produced locally. There's a lot of objects brought from the colonies to Italy for exhibitions, like in other European countries, but they are always used as a contrast to show the difference between what Rava here called the culture of the bazaar and their own production. So there's no an interest in my understanding, in learning from a local production in this case.
Great. Oh, you had another question? Yeah.
Carolyn, the Marie Antoinette watch, when you showed it, was there a cover to it, or it existed to show the inner workings of the watch itself?
It did not have a cover. It was completely clear just to show the inside. That was what Brigade thought was most important. He didn't want a lot of fluff of decoration on the outside, but the inside was made out of sapphires, part of it. So he thought the most important part was the gears and the inner workings.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have questions for everyone, but I guess I'll just
we'll
ask.
Three
I'll just
more
ask
questions.
Caroline.
That's fine. That's fine.
No. I apologize if you addressed this, but you showed that one early Breguet watch with the star and crescent and the sunburst. I'm sorry if you said something about this, but could you talk a little bit about the history or design of that? Because it looks just like a contemporaneous Ottoman military medal. So another random Islamic connection. And then also like the face is sort of related to the Arab
I actually have not a lot of information on this piece. I have a Breguet book that the company put out. It sort of just had pictures of the object of his watches, and I found this one to be compelling, and it didn't really have anything written on it, so I honestly can't really speak too much about it, but it definitely has more design than the Marie Antoinette watch on the case, where that one's completely concerned about the mechanics in it. But sorry, I can't really answer it.
No, it's fine.
Oh, very cool. All right, well, thank you so much to our speakers, to the audience. Just another round of applause.